You can't play football with Liverpool, their top Premier team. You'd never be able to get a tryout. You can't go and have a pool party with the Playboy Bunnies. It's not going to happen for you. You need a lot of money for that. Got to have the right connections in the industry, you know. You can't pool the wealth of the proletariat and form some sort of communist society that outmodes capitalism and, you know, revolutionizes the whole world. Been tried already, didn't really work, mainly in Eastern Europe, you know. You can play with one pool, though, which is fantasy esports with esports pools. And at the moment, they have a contest going where you can win some skins. You know, you'll have those in my fantasy pool for ECS Season 3 Finals, link in the description box below. So ECS Season 3 Finals is upon us. And obviously we had the other two before, and then before that they used to be the Face It Finals. They had the Season 2 one, famously was the one where Fnatic won and began the Fnatic era back in 2014. And then once we came to ECS era, Season 1 obviously was won by Luminosity in epic fashion over G2, Shox's G2. And then Season 2 was won by Astralis over Optic Gaming in the rematch of the week prior from E-League Season 2. And now Season 3 is here. And first of all, ECS has really locked out because the complaints about EPL, which by the way has more slots for their finals, they have 6 slots from each region, whereas ECS only has 4 from each region. But ECS has been lucky in as much as there haven't been those crazy upsets online. And so as a result, they've gotten the top 3 EU teams. They've gotten FaZe, Astralis, G2. They've gotten them. And all teams that are champions recently and people want to see play. And then the 4th team they've got is Fnatic. And Fnatic is this crazy, dangerous, still playmaking, certainly a lot of teams afraid to play them. They're this team that people know have a chance to do damage and have fragging power. So that's an ideal person to have in there as a wild card team, actually. You probably wouldn't want Virtus.pro at the moment, actually. They're not in good form. Then you go over to the NA side of things. They've got SK. Okay, that was fairly assured anyway, but we need them. They're a potential world number 1. They're a team that adds prestige, makes the field more competitive at your events. We've got SK, so we've got the top 4 teams in the world. Then we've got what on paper are the best NA teams. Like, sure, now CLG certainly can stake their claim and have done a lot internationally, but within NA, it is still the story of Cloud9, Team Liquid, Optic. Now, Optic's over in Group A with the Killers, and the others have their chances in Group B. So, first and foremost, the best aspect of this event is that it is the only event before the major that will have those big 4, those 4 teams that everyone looks at, like the major champion's going to be one of these 4, and we want to see how them all battle each other still, and they've all won things recently. Astralis won the Clash for Cash, obviously, and we're already a consistent top team. FaZe obviously won Star Series and made the final of IEM Sydney. SK Gaming obviously won IEM Sydney and now won DreamHack Summer. G2 won EPL, and DreamHack Tours. So everyone's won things and they're the champions, the 4 kings as it were, and we're going to see them battle off against each other. Now, Cologne is going to be an amazing event, a much bigger event than this one, but it has no Astralis. So the problem is if Astralis wins this event and then goes away, it takes away some of the luster of Cologne in terms of you won't see the number 1 or the team that everyone wants to see beaten before then. You get to see all 4 at this one. Then you add in that Fnatic is on a hot streak right now. They've already had the firepower before and they're rising, that now you want to see Fnatic perhaps in the semi-finals against SK or FaZe. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen if those guys play? That could be quite fun. I mean, I guess you do know for SK because you've seen that play out a few times, but I feel like that story's not entirely written yet, and especially something like FaZe or G2, that would be a really interesting matchup with Fnatic if it was to happen. Then you got to say that you have these top NA teams. Let's have another chance to see who the best NA team is, and also have them battle against Europeans because they'll be in the same group as the Astralis and FaZe of the world. Then finally, the lower bracket of the group, because it's a GSL SAR system, but with the difference that, unlike the past majors, where yes, like the decider match is best of 3, but you know, the first matches and the winner match is best of 1, and then the lower match is, as in the losers match, is best of 1. All they change is all the lower matches are best of 3. So only the upper bracket match is a best of 1. So that means that if an Astralis or a Fnatic gets upset, you won't ever have them just going out from losing a best of 1 like TSM famously did at EPL Season 1 Finals. No, instead they have to lose a best of 3. So it means for these elite level teams, you also get a much better chance they're going to make the playoffs, which for me is more interesting. I want to see those elite teams play. So in Group A, this is the one that is the killer's lineup. You feel so bad for Optic on this one because you've got FaZe, you've got SK, you've got G2, and then you've got Optic. Now, it goes without saying, Optic basically has no chance here. Like, they do in as much as if you have that miracle run and you win the 2 best of 1s, you can get out. But to win the 2 best of 1s, you have to beat 2 of the top 4 teams in the world. So I will still say it's pretty unlikely to happen. And then you add in that the lower bracket matches are best of 3. So unless you go through to the upper bracket, you're playing best of 3s to win. It's just not going to happen for you against those elite level teams. So for Optic, they're kind of fucked immediately. It's out of the equation ultimately. Then you got to look at the other 3 though. And obviously any of these 3 could win the tournament, but one of them's going out in the group. Now, if we look at the way that it matches up, this is the interesting part. Because I feel like FaZe in the map pool has a slight edge. Because FaZe's traditional ban anyway is Cobblestone. And even though they played it against Astralis in Sydney, they're not going to be dicking around with it in this tournament, I'm pretty sure. Because both SK and G2 are pretty strong on it. And it's one of the favourite maps of those 2 teams. So the fact that FaZe automatically bans it takes a little bit of the danger away from FaZe, especially in the best of 1s. But actually, even when it gets to the best of 3s in theory. So once you take the Cobblestone away from SK and G2, now FaZe actually has a map pool that can slant either way to play either team. Like, for example, FaZe having Train, I think actually works in their benefit against both teams. If they play against SK will still play Train. They're not as good as Train as they used to be, whereas I'd say FaZe is better right now. Meanwhile, G2, they used to like Train, but first of all, Train was the one that they went out on against G2 at the Star Series, their first offline best of 3. And beyond that, they've really moved away from that map. It hasn't been working for them. So I feel like that's a scare where you can probably either pick that and get a win against G2, or you can force them to ban it second rotation, which they don't want to do in general because they want to ban other things there. So I actually feel as though in this scenario, it might come down to a Train when FaZe and SK play, in which case I slant the edge to FaZe. And then in terms of G2, if G2 plays against FaZe, I feel like the map they might end up settling on is Inferno or Overpass. Now, if it's Overpass, that's the really spicy one. Inferno, I think, is very much up for grabs. They both have good CT sides. They both run good double op setups. But I feel like Overpass is the spicy one. Because that's the one where, despite it never really being a French map in general, G2's actually been coming on leaps and bounds on that map, and they're getting pretty good on it. Whereas, yes, we know FaZe used to be good on it. We know Carrigan has always been a good leader on it, but he's barely had to use it these last few months because he uses it to scare other teams away from Overpass. If you're a good Overpass team, that's usually what it's used for at the moment. Teams don't want to play you on it, and unless they have a permaban, you're not going to get to play it. So at the moment, I feel like actually that will be a really hype matchup where G2 could get the edge. So in general, I actually am edging it to that FaZe has the map veto ban advantage to go through. I still think SK is actually the best team in the group at the moment. So I feel as though SK could just win out the best of 1s on that basis as well. But I think FaZe has the edge in the map veto. Now, when SK plays G2, that's a really interesting matchup. Obviously, it's the one where we already saw that actually SK lost to G2 in the semi-final of EPL. But what's interesting about this one at the moment is, so we know G2 does a traditional Mirage ban. That's just still the way that they think. And obviously Mirage is a very strong map for SK, so you want that anyway. And then we know that SK does the nuke ban, which you've got to do against G2 anyway, because G2's very good on nuke. So those two take care of themselves. So realistically, we're left with maps like Overpass, Cash, Inferno. These are maps which realistically the two teams want and will play and will pick between. So actually, I feel like there's a lot going on there that you can look at. Like, G2's been surprisingly good on T-sides of Cash recently. I think SK is still a good Cash team, but bizarrely they've lost it a couple of times. Inferno is very much up in the air. I think that might be the interesting one that I really would wonder. I think SK could win it. Overpass, I feel like Overpass is a map beyond even Train. I feel like on Train, SK is still pretty competitive. On Overpass, they've really lost the plot on that map. I think G2 would beat them on that one. So I feel like in this matchup, in the best of 1s even, G2 has a pretty good chance. In best of 3, I'm edging it slightly towards SK. I think they're the better team. But I feel like G2 match up real well there. And the key is they can beat the SK on SK's maps. There's not really any trick map that SK can go into at any point in time there. And obviously, Cobble always available as well. Both teams love it. So I think that's danger for SK. For SK, they need to just get out and beat FaZe and go through the best of 1s. That's probably the best system for them to get out in first place. Because if they go in the lower bracket, maybe it is FaZe and G2 we see going in the playoffs. So over in Group B, we've got Astralis, Fnatic, C9, and Team Liquid. So first of all, it's clear for Astralis they should be able to get out. Remember, with the lower bracket as well, best of 3s, it's almost certain Astralis is getting out of this group. They have a fantastic map pool. They can play against any of these teams here. I don't think there should be any problems, really. I do think that Fnatic is dangerous for them because Fnatic has a psychological component of playing them in the past, where Fnatic is another one of those teams that always used to get the better of them and used to beat them in incredulous fashion, and sometimes Astralis would choke. But you go back even further, and obviously Astralis used to also have the edge over Fnatic. He used to beat them a bunch in like the spring to the summer of 2015. So I feel like that nullifies itself a bit. It's just that I think when Fnatic players play Astralis, Astralis players have a level of respect for them, which means that it becomes a close matchup in that particular sense. So it's more like if Fnatic comes out all guns blazing. And the good thing for Fnatic is the fragging has been really high level and spread across the team. It's not just one or two players. So that makes them dangerous, and they have that playmaking ability. That style of loose but heavy fragging playmaking is always an interesting matchup against the controlled, disciplined style of an Astralis or an SK. Well, SK in the past, not SK at the moment. They're more of a hybrid between the two. So I feel like Fnatic is the real danger card in this group, and I think Fnatic will come out first or second. Like, I think they will get out of this group with Astralis. And the interesting part is, when you look at the maps that they have to play, if they play against Astralis, odds are they're going to be playing Overpass, Mirage, Inferno. Now, at the moment, those have proven to be strong maps for the guys from Fnatic. The problem they have is, I think that Astralis is better on pretty much every map there. And the fact that Fnatic's like, oh, how have we backed into this Overpass? Doesn't matter. The best Overpass in the world is Astralis. So I feel as though that'll probably end up on a Mirage or an Inferno. So I give Fnatic chances, certainly, with the fragging. But I'll still say Astralis is going to win that matchup and win the group. Now, obviously, Fnatic bans Nuke in general anyway. And you don't really want to fuck with Astralis on Nuke unless you're like one or two extremely good teams. Now, the other battle is interesting to me, Cloud9 and Team Liquid, just because I want to see them play each other. And hopefully in the lower best of three, so we get a full best of three. Because, yeah, we know in NA tournaments, Cloud9 finds a way to win these matches. But when they're at an international tournament and when you have to play other teams first, what will still happen there? Because I think Team Liquid's the better team. I think they've got a way better system, better in-game leader. I think the pieces are out there. I think they've got the best player, in fact, in Elige. And I think they've got a lot more potential, whereas Cloud9 has no potential. It's all tapped out. If anything, their potential is like 7 months in the past. They don't look that great at the moment. They're still certainly dangerous. Like, I'd say Cloud9's best chances is actually in the best of ones. Like, maybe upsetting the first one in incredulous fashion and then losing out from there, because I don't see them winning these best of threes and getting out of the group. I also think in terms of the matchups, like Cloud9 against Fnatic, I think will be a bloodbath, because I think when Cloud9 plays against Fnatic, they just have way more fragging, and they also have a loose start. It's going to be so tough for Cloud9 to have any read on them. I think Team Liquid against Fnatic might be interesting, because I think Team Liquid at least has the maps, and they at least have the style that they could do something. Like, you look at the fact that Team Liquid might play something like Cobblestone, which in general Fnatic's been staying away from, despite their old school strength on it. They'll play Cash, which again Fnatic bizarrely staying away from. I feel like Team Liquid at least can match up well with Fnatic, although they will lose very likely as well. In terms of Astralis, neither of the NA teams can really fuck with Astralis. Like, map pool-wise, Astralis has way too much for them, and that disciplined style is almost tailor-made to just break NA teams down. Finally, Device has always gone wild on NA teams, especially the Cloud9s and Team Liquids of this world. So just not a good matchup whatsoever for them. So I think actually that group's pretty easily set. So the interesting thing for me is what happens in the playoffs, because you obviously only top four in the playoffs, then we have best of threes from there on out. So personally, the final I want to see, although I guess I'll take it in the semis as well, is I want to see at some point Astralis play SK. I feel like that could be a really interesting matchup. I think that the key deciders in that matchup would be Mirage and would be Train and Inferno. Those are the three maps that would end up not necessarily being played, but one of these will be the decider, and that will probably be the one that is the one that finishes the tournament. So I think it will end up being Inferno or Train, and I actually think on Inferno, I think SK can be real dangerous, but on Train, actually, I still edge it to Astralis. I still think they've got the edge there. So I feel as though the fact that Astralis can pick Overpass, and okay, what are SK going to pick? Presumably pick Cash or something. I don't know. I mean, they can't pick Cobblestone, obviously. It can pick Mirage, but Astralis can win that. I feel like that matchup, I think it is going to slant to Astralis, but I think it will be a great matchup. We haven't seen it yet, and we know SK has the stuff, you know. They can rise to the occasion. They can absolutely make it an epic match. And another matchup that I want to see, obviously, is one that, again, we haven't seen. I would like to see FaZe play Fnatic, and that would be a fire game. Because we know FaZe has a system, yeah, and they have some amazing players, but Fnatic, I feel like, actually has the balls to go head-to-head with FaZe and say, oh, you want to do all this force buy shit, and you want to make plays around the map, and you want to let your individual players run loose? We invented that shit. And then they'll just go off with it. I mean, they didn't really, but you know what I mean? Like, they really took that to another level at late 2015, early 2016. I feel like they would be in their comfort zone playing that matchup. But FaZe can shift the veto into their favour. FaZe has way more maps, and so they can at least get an edge in some sense there. And Fnatic's going to need some of the classic Fnatic magic, as it were, to bullshit their way through a FaZe map. So FaZe still has the edge on that one. Now, if we go the other way around, FaZe Astralis, obviously a classic matchup. The reason I'd like to see that again is, first of all, the veto's been going so crazy between these teams, and then secondly, I actually hope that we don't get a mad one where they float and pick Cobblestone against each other. I would hope this time around that Astralis just bans Cobblestone and just outright plays out the rest of the veto, because the rest of the veto is fine for them. And if they end up again with like an Inferno as a decider, Astralis can feel confident in that. They were up 13-7 on that one or whatever it was at Star Series. That's still a good map for them, and they can say, hey, if you can individually beat us, go ahead, but we believe in the system, we think we can run this back again, and I think that would be a fantastic series. Now, in terms of some of the other ones, like if G2 plays Astralis, I don't think that's quite as sexy, unfortunately, because you look at the maps that G2 has at the moment. So, okay, Nuke's going to be out of the equation because they can play it and they're very good on it, but is Astralis really going to crumble under that one? Can they not play against that? I feel like actually Device could find some more picks on Kenny S on that one. That would be a neutralizer, but I'd still give the edge to G2. Okay, they've got Nuke there. Cobblestone they're not going to touch because Astralis will just ban it. Obviously, G2 themselves ban Mirage, but that's going to open up Overpass. Yes, G2 can play Overpass. They're getting pretty good on it. Astralis are the masters of Overpass. That is almost a clear win for them. And then what's your decider? G2's afraid of Train, but if it comes to that, I feel like Astralis has got the edge there. Will it come to Inferno? Okay, real up in the air map. Both teams very good on it, but the T side of Astralis and Inferno has been pretty damn good the last few months. So I feel like that'll be a very exciting series, but a lot of that's on the fragging of G2. If Kenny S and the others show up, yes, they certainly can make it exciting, but in general, you edge it to Astralis. So personally, people are going to think, you're just saying it because you always say Astralis. No, what are the reasons I say Astralis to win these events? So personally, I will actually go ahead and say I think Astralis will win this tournament overall. I think the second most likely team to win the tournament in terms of like ability is probably SK. I think FaZe is going to get out their group in first just because I think the matchup happens to be good for them. But I think SK has a pretty good chance overall, and I think that their style is really flowing at the moment and their stars always turn up. After that, I'd say FaZe, and I actually have G2 with the largest outside chance. And I don't think Fnatic's win their tournament. I think it's unrealistic to think they're going to beat two of these teams. They could upset one. They could maybe make the final if they do really crazy performance, but I don't think it's realistic to think that they're going to go ahead and win the tournament itself. Those other teams are just too good. Now, as I did with the EU Minor, we're going to go ahead and pick my fantasy team for this. There we go. Just got to figure out how do I do this. Let's just go ahead and make me smaller. Right, so just going to go down here. Right, so still a bit of time to enter this competition. So right, we're going to enter the official community pool. Right, so obviously I need my banger first. I need my guy who's going to get tons and tons of kills. So I actually feel like for this one, right, it's true. You have to remember, SK could go out in the group stage. So that is a gamble, whoever you pick in that respect. There's also the fact that G2, SK, and FaZe players are all in the same pool. So one of those teams is going to go out. So if you pick, like, obviously the star players that I'm going to pick, if I'm picking from those teams, first and foremost, to be my banger, is going to be like Nico, yep. coldzera, yes, although you could also go with Fur, certainly. And then the one from G2 would be Kenny S, right? So Nico and Cold are the most expensive, but they also have an element of risk attached to them because they're not going to be playing later. One of them maybe. So I would actually say, personally, I'm going to stay away from them in general. So for FaZe in general, yes, you want Nico or you want Rain. That's the players that are the big hitters you want there. For SK, you want it to be Cold or Fur, but you could also, for cheaper, take a gamble and go ahead and take Phelps, because he puts up pretty good numbers, especially for a third best player, and can sometimes be like second best player in stats. Now, Cold is guaranteed stats, but you got to know that he's going to make it deep in the tournament to win in fantasy here. So personally, I would say since Astralis is in an easier group and still have a good chance to win the tournament, and Device also has very good stats and very consistent stats, that actually his price here at $300 less is actually a steal. Now, if you don't want Device, the other player I'd say to pick there would obviously be Kirby. That's obviously a good risk, but if you notice, he's more expensive. So I'm actually going to go and say Device is a steal as my best player here. So now we want to look, right, first of all, I'm actually going to go ahead and look at the bottom and see who's really cheap. Because who's cheap here who also gets kills? Ooh, that's nice, isn't it? Like Fallen with 11.5 there. That's not bad, actually. I feel like that's pretty nice. So I might go ahead and take him just as my worst player overall. So I've still got 2,000 salary per player. Now I want to go and pick like another good player, but I want a cheapish one now. So I'm going to say I probably want like a phase player here, I think. Are there any phase players available? It's Kiyashima. Rain is 2,200. Let's have a look. Body. See, Body could be a steal because he's pretty cheap there. But obviously, he has had some big performances recently. Kenny S is only 2,000. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and add him, Anna. Right, so I've got 2 players left. At some point, I'm probably going to be forced. Right, so should we take a Fnatic player to gamble? Because the problem is then I'm picking too many teams that... See, I think Fnatic's going to make the playoffs. So I have to see if I'm willing to gamble on one of these. Dennis, Crims. Let's see. Obviously, Olofmeister... That's a bit too expensive, I have to say. He has been much better performing, but he just doesn't hit the highs. And so for fantasy, you really want people who have that crazy plus-minus differential, like your Cold Zera, like the other ones like that. So I feel as though that's too much of a risk to go and take. So, okay, let's have a look. Because Team Liquid are going to play some best-of-3s in the lower bracket, but I feel like... Let's see, I don't know, actually. Maybe I should take Carrigan. Carrigan for 1,500. Taco... I don't know about that. Maybe I should take Carrigan. Let's see what's that give me. I have 2,700. That's too much, isn't it? Right, there's a way to remove them. Right, here's what I learned that I didn't know last time. You can remove them by just doing the minus there, so you don't have to start all over again like I did in the past. So who else shall I choose as a big hitter? Where's Fur? We need that boy. Right, this guy's a monster, so I'll go ahead and take him as well. And then I've got 2,100 left. So let's have a look. 2,100. So... Apex, Stewie, Crims, Dennis. Right, I think a Fnatic player is going to make it, and I don't want to gamble. I mean, I guess it's less of a gamble to take Apex, but I don't think his numbers are going to be as good. So I'll go ahead and say Dennis, actually. Dennis definitely in the past has been extremely good. I think that's a pretty banging team, quite frankly. I'm not sure what you do on the tiebreaker. How many seconds have passed until the first kill? I don't know. Let's say 17. So I'm going to submit my picks there. For Fnatic, you can go a lot of different routes. You can go ahead and you can say, right, I'm going to take Olofmeister. I think Flusher's never a terrible pick, but I'd go ahead and personally I'd take I think Dennis is a pretty good shout after Olof. JW's had some good performances, but he's very streaky. In terms of Team Liquid, I mean, Elijah's a very good one you can pick there. He's going to get some really good stats in general. For Optic, if you're a maniac, you can pick Mixwell. I wouldn't pick any Optic players because it's just likely to get out of the group. Team Liquid at least has an outside shot to get out. Beyond that, I wouldn't pick any other Team Liquid players personally. You can go with JDM if you think they're going to have a strong performance because he would be required for them to have a strong performance and go deep. But I'd say Elijah's the safe pick because even in losses, he gets his numbers overall. For Cloud9, I personally wouldn't take any of their players unless you want to really gamble. If you want to gamble, okay, you can think of Automatic's more of a stable player. But if they're going to go far, it's probably going to take Stewie 2K having numbers. Problem is, though, he gets a lot of deaths as well. It's not as great for fantasy. Personally, I like this team I've got here because I've got Fallen, who obviously, for that money, can every now and then have mad tournaments where he goes really high up. So that's really good. Fur is cheaper than the most expensive, but he's an absolute banger. That boy just puts numbers up. So I like him for that. Device is the really consistent. He's like the budget Cold Zera in this particular sense, and he is in terms of the budget. Kenny S is very cheap considering he's a guy's a fucking monster, and if G2 wins the tournament, he will be the MVP. And then Dennis is not the best, but pretty good within Fnatic, gets a lot of kills, and is obviously a key integral part of them. So you can go and play this here if you want in my thing here. It's free to enter, and you can enter until tomorrow and play fantasy esports with esports pools.